guest today is Shilina. She is dedicated to assisting entrepreneurs who excel professionally, yet face challenges in their personal relationships. With a background in building, scaling, and selling a security guarding company with 1,000 employees, Anna transitioned to coaching and consulting, focusing on enhancing business partnerships, marriages, and parent-child relationships. She's the author of the excellent book, Habit Freedom, Ditch the Limiting Habits and Unleash Consistent Peak Performance. It shares a journey from personal struggles with addiction to achieving peak performance and emotional freedom. So Anna's joining us from the delightful Cape Town today. So I'm very jealous. It's still been very warm weather there, I'm sure, which explains Anna's tan and my very, very white, very white skin. I just wondered if you could sort of share some experiences from your upbringing and what do you think from your childhood, teenage years shaped your values and your outlook on life?
I'm so excited to be here today. And what a beautiful question to kickstart it off. I grew up in an immigrant family, immigrating from Ukraine to Cape Town. And that was a significant shaper of like hard work, for example, seeing the value of that. But also the double-edged sword is while the parents are working hard and seeing how valuable and important that is, having them be emotionally unavailable because they were hustling and having to provide and figure things out, get their money stolen, I don't know, 6 times, or I'm probably exaggerating, but as a kid, everything feels so much bigger.
Yeah.
And so but they did have they went through a lot of scams, and we had to move a bunch of times, and all the hardships that come with immigrating a young family. I was just 6 years old. My sister was 3 years old. We didn't speak the language, so that was also a huge influence in me, because when I went to school at first, I didn't speak English at all. And so I overcompensated and I ended up studying 7 or 8 languages, because our voids in childhood often become our values. So you asked about values. So the things that we perceive as missing become really important to us. So the things that I perceived as missing as a child were languages, or my ability to communicate. I felt that I was smart and I had things to say, but because I didn't have the tools to say it, I experienced lots of frustration. And so I overcompensated by becoming a connection and a specialist, a human behavior specialist, understanding communication and humans to the best of my ability from that void. Relationships and creating the Relating Academy and coaching relationships also comes from the void of, we were a 4-unit family, right? It was my parents and my sister, so we're a nice, tight, small unit, but the rest of my family was in Ukraine. So I did perceive that relationships were missing, relationships with grandparents and extended family and I struggled to make friends in school because I was this awkward kid with a weird accent and, all just weird mannerisms and everything. And so because relationships were missing, now teaching relationships and having the Relating Academy, and that be my bread and butter and the things that fuels me up, the thing that fuels me up and lights me up makes sense. So I love that you started with that question, because I really do believe that our perceived voids in childhood drive our values in adulthood.
That's a really good answer. It's funny, isn't it? You sort of think, well, if somebody experienced a wonderfully communicative household and had loads and loads of friends, they'd be the obvious people to go out to teach you. But I think for people like that, I think they feel it's their normal. And I think it's only when you have had those gaps in your experiences, whether it be you've been through particular traumas or you've experienced loneliness or whatever things are, you feel somehow sort of lean towards engaging with that in your later life, really. So from that sort of interesting, difficult childhood, you were incredibly successful in launching, building, scaling your security company. And I didn't want to ask about the scaling of it, but I wanted to ask, how did it feel the day that you committed to selling it? So after all the work you put in, and suddenly you find yourself, not that person anymore. How did that feel when you decided to sort of step away from all that work and change things altogether?
I felt a combination of things. I felt relieved because it had been a stressful couple years. Obviously, the success came with a giant workload, and it shaped me in a way, but it also made me into a really harsh person because all of a sudden at a young age I was leading all of these people,
Mm.
and so I developed a part of myself that didn't feel soft or feminine or nurturing, or all those things that I do appreciate about myself. It was more in that like strict, stern element, and like I really struggled being in that role consistently, and that's one of the reasons. So I felt relieved that that wasn't going to be my role anymore. They Surprisingly, everyone around me was scared for me. They were like, what are you going to do? Like, this is such a, you've just created it. Like, I had the business basically run not completely without me. I was still responsible for a lot of sales, but I had like the regional managers and I had all the sites, so I'd still oversee a lot of things,
Mhm.
but I wasn't in the grind like I had been for the previous years. So on paper, it looked like I was making more money and I had more time and more freedom, and I still had responsibilities, but not as much as I had the previous years. Like, what are you doing? This is the good time. Like, stick around, type of thing. And I can't explain what it was, but it was just like a really strong sensation that this was not it. Something else was calling my name, another career. And so, like I said, everyone else around me thought it was weird and was scared for me. Like, I remember my dad having a conversation with me. It's like, what do you think you're doing? What are you going to do next? What's your game plan? And I was like, I don't know. I don't quite know. I have some ideas. And I'd already started coaching, actually. I'd already had a coaching client because I was the president of one of the Toastmasters clubs. And so I got a coaching client about confidence and speaking through that. And then I got another coaching client. So I already started in that. And because I'd been going to personal development seminars for years at that stage, and I had lots of friends who were coaches and mentors, I could learn from them, and I had learned from them. I did a lot of like train the trainer programs and all of the things that I felt that I had a skill set. It took a while for me to figure out exactly what I was going to coach and who and all that stuff. I started by coaching sales and confidence, like doing all the things. And then for quite a few years, I was coaching mindset for entrepreneurs and scaling their business. And then eventually I really figured out for myself, at least, that relationships are the be and end all of everything. If you're in business, it's going to be about relationships. If you're in personal, it's about relationships. And so that's where I started the Relating Academy and learned more about relationships and studied that and started relationship coaching.
It's funny in a way because so when I sort of read your background, looked into it a little bit, and had a look at the book and your excellent website and things, I really see it sort of was one of those moments that you have, I guess, where you think, so relationships. Because I think typically, if you'd asked me before that, right, tell me about relationships, my immediate thought would have been to my partner, that relationship. And I guess I wouldn't have applied the word relationship to even to my, yes, of course I have a relationship with my children, but it didn't feel the same way on my colleagues or my friends or whatever. And I think it's a really interesting way to look at things as to how can you take elements from different relationships, how do different relationships need different things at certain times, how do you nurture certain relationships. All that was really, really fascinating. And I think that the whole thing about relationships, communication, human connections is one of those things where to invest time and money and passion and interest in it is so important. But there is a question coming. But I think sometimes we're very, very quick to sign up for a gym membership. We might never go, but we sign up for a gym membership. We sign up for the golf club or the tennis club, or we go and see a physiotherapist, or we see a chiropractor or an osteopath, whatever. There's still, I think, a bit of a reluctance or lack of knowledge about the value of being mentored, coached, supported, nurtured as a person from a mental perspective. Do Well, do you agree? And why do you think that might be?
I personally think it is the wildest thing that we are not taught relationships in school, that it's not the primary topic for every grade. It's a lifelong school. Relationships never end, and there's always things to learn on many different levels. And so the idea that you should just know because what you've modeled it from your parents or
Mm,
caregivers or people around you, and that's the best that it gets. Like, how do you know? We have no idea. These days we have information at our fingertips. We can read books and listen to podcasts, and there's so many brilliant coaches and mentors out there. And I'm constantly upskilling myself and learning more and more every single day, even that way. And so but it does take a bit of a mindset shift, going like, oh, okay, I do want to get good in this area of my life, and it's just as important as going to gym. In fact, the Gottmans, Julie and John Gottman, are these renowned relationship coaches that I love to follow and study from. They say they've done studies. They have this very scientific approach to relationships, which is why I love studying with them. And they said if you had to choose between nurturing a relationship and going to gym, nurturing a relationship actually has more health benefits. Not
mm,
saying going to gym isn't important,
mhm.
very important to move your body, but nurturing that relationship has even more health benefits. It equates to longevity and energy and all sorts of things. And if we really understood that, we'd value relationships and invest in understanding the communication and skills that we need to nurture beautiful relationships.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. Now, I think there's two things in that I wanted to sort of pick out. One is, so my children, and I mentioned before, they're both sort of teenagers. If they look to their mum and I for how we developed our relationships, it doesn't really help them in a way because we developed our relationships with our friends at school, etc., before smartphones existed. So they have relationships now with people that they see on such an infrequent basis. So I think there's a challenge between managing I don't want to say virtual because it's a real relationship online versus a relationship in real life, in the physical world. And then I think secondly, one of the big challenges we have as a society now is we have a increased number of people, particularly young men for some reason, that state they are lonely or feel lonely most of the time. I think in the UK it's something like 34% of 18 to 35-year-olds don't have a best friend or say they're lonely, and like I say, all the science shows that people in relationships, regardless of the type of relationship, whether it's a intimate relationship, friendship relationship, whatever it is, have better health outcomes of people that are lonely and increasingly feeling depressed. And that those are big challenges from a society that we don't seem to hear. We don't hear the government talking much about loneliness or how to overcome it, how to reach out to people and things. And it's really difficult. I sometimes go to the store, the supermarket, and there might be somebody in line in front of me or behind me. And sometimes you sort of think, gosh, that person, the cashier might be the only person they talk to today. If they're an elderly person, live on their own, etc. And my dad will sometimes say he goes out to the supermarket and that might be the one person he talks to all day. And it's, yeah. So I think sometimes it's nice to have the empathy to let them have that conversation and not be tutting and looking at your watch and things. And it's, and I know that even though you have had and continue to have incredible professional success, you've had feelings of loneliness because when you first moved to South Africa, you've mentioned battling addiction. I wondered, how do those experiences influence the person that you are?
And just to touch on what you were saying, there's that crazy statistic how loneliness is that much worse than smoking. I don't know how many
Yeah.
cigarettes, we can Google like it has real consequences. And, relationships are risky. Like when we engage with another person, there's an element of risk that this person is going to reject us, right? Or not like us, or whatever the story that we tell ourselves. Whereas our phone isn't going to do that easily. It's going to support whatever illusion we might have about ourselves more likely. And so I think a big part of that is developing that relationship with the risk, like I might be friendly to someone and they won't be friendly back, and that's okay. That doesn't mean I'm being rejected, or that doesn't have to hurt me. So it's really about, I think, if someone is listening to this and they are feeling that, part of that 34% or whatever, and it's like that feeling that loneliness, it's definitely overcomable, and like there are solutions to it, and one of those is embracing the risk of
Mm.
other people are random, other people are strange, they're weird. 9 out of 10 of them are not going to be for you, but maybe the 1 out of 10 is going to be, um but at the end of the day, if we value our life, we want to live a long life that we are in love with, don't want to numb out from. So, with the habit freedom story that I'm going to share and get into in a moment, was all about creating a life that I didn't want to numb out from. Not just ditching the booze or eating better, or, not doom scrolling. I really had to like fill my life with connections and people and experiences and nature and all the things that I didn't want to, like I say, numb out from it. So the darker days of my addiction, that enslavement of the addictions that I had, um, definitely gave me a lot of compassion, a lot of empathy as well. Like I've always felt deeply throughout my whole life, but those experiences really catapulted me into the depths more and more. So there's really no one that I could judge and say like I can't see myself in your like I would never do that. I can't say that about any one person's situation, because the places that I found myself, I was shocked. I was like, oh, if I could find myself in these
Mm.
dark, twisted places, anyone can. And I had a very privileged upbringing. Like I'm very lucky. I have the most supportive family, and and I had like all the help and support that I could have needed at the time. So that's one thing that really that came out of that, is the depth of compassion, kindness in a way, I think, and relatability. I feel that I can relate with a lot of people a lot more, because I've had the breadth of the human experiences.
Mm. Do you think you have an addictive personality? The only reason I'm not saying that as a bad thing, because I do, and I have to be so careful with what I start with. But you mentioned before about, rather than just learning one language, right? I'll learn 7 languages, and then rather than starting a small business, right, I'll start a huge business, and rather than going to do mentor a few people, I mentor everybody, and
Mhm.
you seem to there's a fine line, I guess, between putting all your energy into something and it being an addiction. And people do. Sometimes people sort of laugh at people. Oh, you're addicted to work. Oh, you just work hard. But it's a real thing. People do have addictive tendencies, I think. Would you describe yourself as that?
I do. I think I fall into the third. I don't know if you've heard of this third metric. So Gabor Mate, who writes a lot about trauma
Yeah.
and addiction, he writes about how his experience and knowledge and everything. About a third of people have a tendency towards addiction, if you could call it that, or
Mhm.
like you say, like doing all or nothing.
Yeah.
Like all the work or none of the work. Then about a third of people will develop no addictions. They can pick up a cigarette and then not never pick up a cigarette again, or like once a year at a party or whatever, and
Mm.
then it doesn't bother them at all. And then about a third is can be swayed either way. So depending on their nature and their nurture, their experiences and their circumstances and all the things, that they can either never be addicted to anything, or belong to
Mhm.
the other third group. And so I do think I belong to that third, where I have that tendency. But I also write about how one of my most controversial opinions is that addiction isn't necessarily hereditary. It's more about what does get passed down is the trauma responses, and the lack of regulation skills. So because I didn't have the regulation skills, I found myself regulating with alcohol with overeating, with doom scrolling. That was my coping mechanisms. Those were
Mhm.
my skills. And so if the skill sets, and then obviously dealing with trauma, healing trauma, understanding it, um, going into inner child work, I do that a lot with clients as well. Once those things are healed, then maybe there's a tiny genetic factor. But with epigenetics, we now know that most of the things that we're experiencing are a result of our environment. And experiences and upbringing. So I personally, like I said, controversial opinion, come for me or don't, is that calling something genetic or this is just how it is quite lazy. And I'd rather ask, well, what are the skill sets that I don't have? What are like the regulation skill sets or self-regulation skill sets? And what am I not seeing, not understanding about, where the pattern came from in the first place? Like, for example, for me, growing up in this immigrant family, there was a lot of conflict and a lot of tension. So I would escape the now. So it was my inability to be in the present moment, because the present moment didn't feel safe. It didn't feel pleasant. So my first escape was academia. I got just really good at school and just buried my head in books. And that was applauded because I got to get the
Yeah.
awards and the A's, and my parents didn't have to worry about me because look how well she's doing. Like, we can carry on hustling. But what that led to is then when the alcohol came into my life, I could easily latch onto that because I was still escaping the present moment. I was still unable to be with discomfort, with pain or conflict. And as an adult, I had to learn to do that. See, my superpower felt like it was drinking because I would just numb out. But my superpower now is my ability to be in the present moment with whatever comes up, the discomfort, the pleasant things, all the things. And so switching those superpowers was that hero's journey that I write about.
I like it that you have a controversial view of things. It's good. We should have views that aren't as the mainstream. I have a view that there's a really interesting book called Our Body Keeps a Score, and it
Mhm.
sort of talks about that we all have. I'm not sure what the right words are. So not necessarily inherited trauma, but our body remembers and has elements in it from going back,
From
many generations.
experiences, yes.
And if we don't unpick those, then yeah, it's hard. So you're sort of starting off from a base of nobody's starting off from they all say everybody starts off the same. Well, we really don't. We all start off in different ways, and then through our environment, through how we're nurtured, through what we live through, then it has a big impact. Then it's interesting. I never thought of this before. So I used to be when I was a kid, I loved reading. I remember going to a special school assembly because I'd read like a book every day of the year in the school. I read all the books in the school library, and I always used that I could always immediately imagine myself in the situation of the person in the book, and I'd be transported away. So completely the opposite of being in the now, being present. And then as I got older into adulthood, I drank, and I sort of stopped drinking about 14 years ago now. And I think I used it in the same way to sort of, well, I'm not reading anymore, but what am I going to have to? And it wasn't even escape. It was exactly as you say, to just make those thoughts just not exist for a time, and then you just not be present. And I think we are learning more and more about mindfulness and about being present. I think it's, especially when you're around people in whatever the relationship is, you want to feel that you're with the person, that they're not on the phone at the same time or they're not doing something else. You actually can spend time with them. And it's amazing how different it is when you're really with somebody to when you're just physically next to somebody. It's a very, very different thing. I wanted to come on to the habit freedom because it really fascinated me. And a couple of questions in one, if that's okay. So first of all, how did you develop the principles outlined? If you could touch on the 5 relationships involved in becoming free from bad habits. But before that, sorry, remember all these questions. I wonder if you could explain what is the difference between a good habit and a bad habit? Is it about the outcomes?
All very good questions. So let me do them one at a
Mhm.
time, answer them one at a time, and remind me if I don't get to all of them.
Okay.
I actually don't call habits good and bad.
Mhm.
I try to stay away from good and bad labels because we like, just as a society, we do slap on that judgment pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And what looks good today can look bad tomorrow. There's that parable about the farmer and his son who broke his leg, right? And all the neighbors said, "Oh, I'm so sorry that your son broke. That's so bad." But then the next day, a war broke out, and the son didn't get drafted because he had a broken leg. And everyone said, like, "Oh, that's so good." So what looks bad today can look good tomorrow. And so instead, I label habits expansive or limiting.
Mhm.
Simply because every single human being has only two states of being. We are either in a state of expansion or contraction, and it mirrors seasons in nature, right? Summer, expansion, blooming blossoms, all the things,
Mhm.
and then winter, contraction.
Mm.
So we are nature. We're not just part of nature. Human beings are nature. So we go through those states of expansion and contraction. And so all habits are either limiting you or expanding you. And and that is in comparison to your goals and aspirations. So when you start working with someone, we go down and figure out their values. Like your very first question about, like, your values, we like to break down what's the most important thing, because I really believe that when your values are clear, decisions are easy. This is my number one, or like top principle to live by. If I'm unable to make a decision, it's because I'm not clear on my values. I'm not clear on what's most important to me right now. So if I get clear on what's most important, and this also works in relationships, by the way, when there's a disagreement and people aren't, like, the two people aren't unsure which way to go, in terms of like the best decision to make, when you go back to, what's our values? Is our values, for example, right now to have fun as a family, or our values to save money?
Mhm.
And so that will help you make that decision whether you book that holiday or not. And this is just one of those examples, right? And so it's really about identify what are your values. And every single person has three areas of life. We all have health, we all have relationships and love, and we all have wealth. So most of the things in our lives, most of our goals can be categorized into these three things. And that's really a great starting point. If you have no idea where to start, like, what's important to me, what are values, like, I don't know, like, just start and write out what is important to me health wise, what's important to me relationship wise, and all the different relationships, and then what's important to me wealth wise. That includes career, business, whatever is going to build that wealth for you. And wealth is different things to different people.
Mhm.
And so then, in comparison to those values, to those goals that you set in those three areas, are your habits bringing you closer to them or further away? And so that would then, in a sense, if you wanted to use the words good and bad, the habits that are bringing you closer to your goals are going to be the good ones that you want to invest in more. And then the ones that are bringing you further away from your goals are going to be the limiting ones. Does that resonate?
It does. It does. I was just thinking when you were saying that, and it's a silly thing. I listened to a podcast the other day, and this guy was talking about wealth, and he was saying he has a lot of friends that are very wealthy, the net worth of over 100 million, sort of thing. And he was saying when he talks to them, and they've been hanging out with billionaires, so they all feel really poor. They feel, and I think a lot of the, I'm not sure if challenge is the right word. A lot of things that drive people sometimes is this sort of comparison culture that we're in. So if you go on Instagram and you look at people's Insta lives, and they're all incredibly buff, they all seem to drive amazing cars and amazing holidays, have stunning partners. My goodness, I want that. And it's not. It's a bit like if you're the first person in the street to get a car, it's like everybody else is like, wow, that person's got a car, isn't that amazing? As soon as the next person gets a better car, you think, oh, my car's not so good, it's older. It's a lot of it is what you said before. A lot of it's about context. It's how you're feeling within a particular context. Because I could be incredibly wealthy in some countries in the world and just average in lots of other countries. A lot of it is about context. And I think so when you talk to people about them defining their values or their aims for wealth, relationships, health. And this isn't meant to be a diminishing word, but do they have to be realistic? So if somebody says, okay, well, I want to be the wealthiest man in the city. I want to be the fittest woman in my, out of all the school mums. I want to have the best relationship with the most amazing partner. How do you get people to set? You don't even want to say the word achievable, because that sounds like, I'll just get that. How do you help people to?
So actually recently onboarded a client, and this was something we worked on in terms of, give me your like absolute fantasy scenario. What are your goals? Like, if it's millions or billions, it doesn't matter. Like, just like write it out, like absolute dream world fantasy, abracadabra. I have a magic wand. What does it look like? Right. Really just like get that out and let yourself dream. I think that is the first step. Like, let yourself dream, go wild, do the vision board as big as you want, as small as you want. It doesn't matter. And just like let that free. I think that's also important, to be able to just give yourself that permission to dream as big as you want.
Yep.
Then the follow-up is like, okay, great. Now, in the next 3 to 6 months, what are we going, like, what is the actual, doable type of goal? So you can have both. You can have the really grand goals and desires, and you can have the one that you're working on in the next 3 to 6 months. And I do recommend having both. I recommend having both. I want to circle back to your other questions about the habit freedom principles and the relationships. I just remember that was part of the questions, and how, studying human behavior, I've always had a knack for putting like systems down, or like just figuring things out, going like, oh, I did this because of this, or that helped me because of that, and really like putting it into, this is the 5-step thing, or these are the 5 relationships. And so they developed kind of organically as I was going through my own, like breaking through my own limiting habit of the alcohol and the doom scrolling and the eating sugar and all the things. And so the very first relationship that I had to master was the relationship with discomfort, which meant that I had to be okay with having a craving. I was going to have a craving for a chocolate cake or a glass of wine, or to scroll, or to numb out in some way. And I would have to be able, have the skill set to sit through the discomfort of the craving. And really, that ability to go through discomfort of the emotions that arise. Remember, like I said earlier on, I've been running away from emotions since I was a little girl, right? I didn't want to feel the conflict and understand it, know about it, anything. I just wanted to escape it. So it was like a whole paradigm shift for me to understand, like, okay, if a discomfort arises, first of all, most cravings last 20 to 30 minutes. Some last a bit longer, depends also for what. But the peak where you're like, really, where it's like, I don't know if anyone listening to this has ever experienced that 5 p.m. blinding craving for a glass of wine, where you're like, you can't think of anything else. And you think that this feeling is going to last forever. And the only thing that's going to make this feeling go away is a glass of wine or a bottle or two. And for anyone who's been through that journey and has had a day one or 1,000 day ones like I have, then you know that even that intense feeling does dissipate and it passes. And if you can, this is why I'm like such a huge fan of meditation, because if you can meditate and just observe those waves and that feeling come up and come down, you are going to start to really master your mind. So that was the first relationship. But it wasn't enough. Discomfort, going from discomfort to discomfort, and white knuckling, and just, not doing the thing, would end up in me burning out. And I would just give in, and I eat 10 chocolate cakes. Obviously that's an exaggeration, but I'd eat like, all the things, and drink all the things, and I do, like we mentioned, have that extreme in me. And so what I figured out, that I also need, on top of the relationship with discomfort, I also need a relationship with the light. And what I mean by light is things that fill my cup, that light me up, that inspire me, things that give me dopamine, that aren't like the cheap dopamine habits, that aren't scrolling, that aren't drinking, that aren't eating. Because in the absence of a grand life that gives me dopamine from achievements and connection and talking to people and going into nature and doing cool things, in the absence of a life that gives me dopamine from those things, I am going to reach for the cheap stuff that is being pushed on me, to be honest, with
Yeah.
all the advertising and everything. It does, these systems, these machines are very powerful. They have the smartest people in the world working tirelessly on how to enslave you more and more in these limiting habits. So, as a little being, right, a human being, you fighting this whole system can be incredibly challenging. And I had a lot of judgment over myself because I should know better. I studied these things, I have all the tools, but I also had to have quite a bit of humility in the process, going like, you know what, I actually, I, I'm weak against these huge systems. And then when I did fill my days and my life with gratitude and light and love and things that lit me up, then I didn't need those limiting habits that much. Like it was boring. Like I remember trying to watch, and I used to numb out on Netflix all the time, like hours, days, weeks, like just binging series. Like, oh my gosh, it's embarrassing. And I remember recently, or a few months ago, watching a movie, and 20 minutes in, I was like, my life is so interesting compared to this movie. Like, I just switched it off. It didn't have any hooks into me because I created a life that was so much more interesting. And it's like, I feel like I'm in a movie in my own life these days. Why do I need to watch a movie? I'm not discrediting movies. Like some movies, and I will still watch an episode here or there, or watch a comedy show or something funny to entertain myself. I'm not completely immune to that. Um, but I'm definitely not losing days, weeks, and months to the stuff anymore. So that was the second relationship, the relationship with the light. The third relationship really came to me when I was sitting in a Vipassana meditation retreat, which is 10 days of silence, which is really that relationship with the now. We touched on it a little earlier. And, Power of Now is a great book about how there are no problems in the now. And all of this anxiety that people have, all of this depression comes from ruminating about the past or having thoughts and anxieties about the future. But if you get so present with the now, it's beautiful. Like they aren't like, that's where all the power happens. That's where all the potential lies in us. It's not about worrying about the future, or even planning about the future. We can plan for the future, but the actual power and potential and connection happens in that present moment. So that was the third relationship. And then the fourth relationship was the relationship with the self. So in teaching in the Relating Academy, with like coaching relationships and everything, figured out that the most important relationship to master is the one that we have with ourselves. And once that one is solid, once I have that self-trust, self-respect, self-love, all my other relationships start to improve. And really understanding, okay, within this relationship with the self, there are three selves. It's the inner child, it's the inner oracle. So just like the inner child, the inner oracle is our older, wiser version of ourselves. So because the past, the present, and the future are coexisting, we can tap into these versions of ourselves. So being in that state where I can listen to my inner child, if there's a self-soothing that inner child wants to do, but I can also tap into the guidance of the inner oracle. And these relationships are interconnected because it's with that relationship with the now, because when I get super silent and super still, then I'm able to listen to the inner oracle and that inner guidance. And then the final relationship, and this is a huge topic, is the relationship with the world at large, with other people in general, and how to use relationships as a form of self-reflection. I really believe that relationships are mirrors and the world is a mirror. And we can either reject the mirror and say, like, no, that's not me. You're over there and I'm different and I'm better and you're worse, or you're better and I'm worse. And we have these comparisons. Or if we say, what I see in you, I also have. And it's both sides of the shadow. It's the beautiful, wonderful, kind things. And then it's also the challenging, ugly, unkind things. We, as human beings, have the full spectrum. And as long as we are denying and disowning and suppressing the darker shadows and the more challenging shadows, and we are more addicted to the world should be all light and fairy and fluffy and loving, it's polar. The universe is polar. We're here to experience both polarities, and the more we can really own all the experiences and not disown or suppress parts of ourselves, and then use those relationships with others. So to give you a practical example, if I witness disrespect, if I experience disrespect from a friend, then I ask myself, okay, if that's a mirror, where am I, one, disrespecting other people, and two, disrespecting myself? So for example, maybe I promised myself that I was going to go to gym and I didn't go to gym, or maybe I let myself down in other ways. Like those micro disrespects start to add up. So instead of being upset that this disrespect comes from the other person, by taking radical responsibility, I can ask, well, how's this showing me how I can show up even better? How can I respect myself more? And then that disrespect starts to go away on its own.
There's a lot there, and hopefully people will listen to this part of the podcast again, because I think it's really interesting how we have all those distinct relationships, but how all those relationships are empowered by their connections with the other relationships. So having a relationship with ourselves helps with relationship with people, relationship with light, relationship with society as large, I guess. Having a bad relationship with ourselves challenges us to be able to deliver those things. How do people I guess the only one of the ones you said that I sort of mulling over, how do people generally respond when, and it's not necessarily what you said, but when they might hear you having said, so if friends are disrespectful to you, it's because you're disrespectful? Is that what people hear? That isn't what you said, but I think sometimes that might be what you actually hear. Well, but how do people respond to that?
Living from a place of radical responsibility compared to victim consciousness is not for everybody.
Yeah.
Not everybody is ready for it or should do it at all. And it will definitely trigger some people going like, that's not my experience. And I completely reject that philosophy. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not shoving it down anyone's throat. It's just the way that I have found in studying human behavior and all the different philosophies and all the different ways of life. It's the thing that makes most sense, that gives me a sense of empowerment the most. And so I asked myself, like, do I want to be empowered or disempowered? Because if I want to be disempowered, there's actually nothing wrong with that. It's not good or bad. It's just that I'm giving that power to the other person.
Yeah.
If, however, I do want to, and it is hard to have that light shone on ourselves all of the time. And I slip into victim consciousness from time to time as well. Like even knowing this and practicing this for years and teaching it and studying it and everything, it's so ingrained in our conditioning and our programming that that it can be really hard to break through. Like I'll give a practical example. I was talking to a friend about, I was like, oh, my friend seems really miserable and sad these days. Like, that's like, oh, like I don't know how to help her. And then I realized, I was like, wait, if misery and sadness is existing in my reality, then it's just shining a light on my own unacknowledged misery and sadness. I just didn't
Yeah.
realize where I was miserable and sad before, but it's there because it's shining that light, that reflection. And so I could either go on being blissfully unaware and blissfully ignorant, and or I could say like, oh, okay, thank you. I wonder where that is, because if it wasn't in my life at all, it wouldn't have bothered me or triggered me at all.
Yeah.
Those triggers and those things that bother us are an opportunity to look inwards, but it isn't for everyone, and it's a lot of work
Mm.
to be operating from that place. But it is the most empowered state that I found.
Yeah, it's like a really powerful self-diagnostic tool, isn't it, in a way? So you sort of,
Hmm.
you know, there's something that, yeah, and like I said, you can choose to ignore what might be within you, but that does take away the power you have to sort of change or develop or evolve, etc. Um, does purpose or a belief in a higher power or religion, do they play into these things, the relationships?
So I do have an idea of, and I call God like the grand organized design,
Mm-hmm.
without the stories and the fairy tales of the different books and the
Yeah.
different, and you know what? I love different religions. I actually love all of them. I love all the different stories. I think they're beautiful. I think that, I've been around many different people with all the different religions and stories. Uh, for me, and this isn't, gosh, how do I say this? Um, because I've studied across religions and across the stories, and I've seen a lot of the similarities and things like that. I think the fairy tales and the stories, they are beautiful guidelines.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually, just like when you're riding a tricycle, like you don't need those anymore. You can just like take the training wheels off, and you can just experience the grand love and the grand light that creates everything. And I do have to thank all of my plant medicine facilitators for
Mm-hmm.
some of these beliefs, and things that how I navigate. And yeah, it's hard for me to experience so many synchronicities and so much beauty in the world and not believe in a grand organized design. That's just my experience. Again, not putting it on anyone. It's just really hard for me to do. And here's the thing: we don't choose our beliefs. I don't know if you
No.
know this. We don't choose our beliefs. We just have enough evidence for certain beliefs. So if someone doesn't have the same belief as me, it's simply because they've had different evidence. It has nothing to do with what I believe or not. They just have different evidence, and that's great. That's what we're here
Mm.
for, to like connect and compare stories and all of
Mhm.
that. So that's why I have no reason or need to tell people to believe in something or not believe in something. It's like whatever the evidence is to support what you're experiencing, that's yours and it's real for you. And I trust that it's, where you need to be. But again, like having that grand organized design, and also like on a practical level, on my own journey with specifically alcohol addiction, I just had this belief that, first of all cycles come to an end. So I knew that this like darkness, this enslavement, this lack of freedom that I had from this substance, it had to end. Now, maybe it would take months, years, decades, or lifetimes. I don't know. But the one belief that really like held me through and helped me through was, if I didn't figure it out right now, I would have to figure it out later.
Yeah.
And so I could either prolong the suffering and keep figuring it out for years, decades, lifetimes,
Mhm.
or I can be like, okay, there must be a way out. Other people have found their way out, and I am going to do it too. And I have to figure it out. It will end eventually. And
Mm.
just really having that strong sense. Um, I think like cracked me open to the other side.
No, I think that's a very thoughtful answer. Yeah, I can completely understand that. I think it's to believe in is to believe in the power of relationships. That's ultimately what it's about, really. Are you okay for time?
Yes, I'm
Great.
great.
One of the things that I used to love when I was reading was reading biographies. So reading about different people, whether it be sports people or business people or politicians, whatever. And one of the things that seemed to be a point of similarity was that the people that were the greatest Olympians or the most amazing business people, that thing tended to dominate to the exclusion of almost everything else. And so many of the people had ended up with broken
Obsession.
relationships, had ended up getting divorced or whatever, or estranged from their children, lots of things. They were so focused on the goal. Is it too much to expect that you could be as successful as you could possibly be while still maintaining good quality relationships with people that you care about?
Everything has a price.
Yeah.
There is always a price to pay. So the short answer is no, you're not going to be as successful. We've seen over and over again that that level of obsession leads to results.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So you want to ask yourself, where on that spectrum do you want to be of obsession versus results? And some people want to go all the way for a few years or a couple decades. But I also write in my book how out of these three areas, love, health, and relationships, the way to prioritize them is health first, because without health, relationships and business and wealth suffer. um, Relationships second, because if I was lucky enough to make a significant amounts of money when I was pretty young, and I realized that like it doesn't keep me warm at night, that money, right? So prioritizing those relationships is far more important than the wealth. Saying that, a lot of people do come from financial instability and have a huge drive and value to prioritize that, but then they start to see that their relationships suffer and or their health suffers, and then when the consequences are too high, then they start to switch around and and flip it around and do focus on eventually health number one, relationships number two, and wealth number three. And so I do think that a certain level of obsession for a short time will get you to your goal. It's actually something that I've been working with on a client with a client recently, and she's like, can I have this balance? And I said, eventually, definitely. Not like, you're probably not going to have that balance in the next few months. If you really want to double down, work really hard on this, and set yourself up, now is the time to do it. And then later on, you'll be able to have the fun and the balance and the time, freedom, and all those things. But there is a time and place for that obsession as well.
That's a really, really honest answer, and probably one of the first times I've heard somebody say something different than you can have it all at the same time. And I'm really, really pleased you said that there is a price to pay for something, and it's just whether at the time that price is worth paying. If it is that I'm going to have to work every weekend because I'm saving up to buy a house, but the result's going to be this. If I have to, I'm running the London Marathon this year, I have to get out and run lots and lots and lots, but that'll be finished in April. So I think it's really good to hear that it's just a case of understanding what needs to give for a certain period of time, and not letting it carry on after you've achieved the certain thing. And that's one of the things with wealth. I think sometimes people get to a point where it's when people can get to a point where they believe they've got enough. Because when we're children, I don't know, we probably think, wow, I don't know, £100,000. Wow, that's so much money. Oh my goodness, I could do so much with that. And I look back at how much I earned when I first started work and how much I earn sort of now, and I think, my goodness, has my life changed that much. I'm still living in a place with a roof and windows and a door. I still have a car. Am I really just this incredibly spendthrift or do whatever? No, not really. So it's interesting about when we decided enough is enough, really. I could really keep you all day, but I'll try not to. Sorry. What are your so when you're plotting your life or you're thinking about the future, even that sort of future state, what are your aspirations for the academy in the next sort of 5 years?
Beautiful question. It's well, I am writing my next book called Relating Academy. So that will be my aspirations are to get traditional publishing for the for Habit Freedom. Right now, it is self-published on habitfreedom.com, and but the aspiration is for the the traditional publishing route for Habit Freedom, and then the next book called Relating Academy to really just open people's minds and hearts to the possibility that all relationships can be mirrors, and give that opportunity for that empowerment that we spoke about, and just help as many people as possible understand each other's languages. One of my favorite things is like meeting people where you don't have to translate your soul, and because you're kind of like speaking the same language. And so just really helping people understand that at deep down, a lot of the things that we want are very similar. We want to be understood, we want to be loved, we want to be heard, we want to be nurtured, we want to all of these things. And then all the surface things, the debates, this person's right, this person right, left, blah, in the middle, whatever, like that is all just like if you witness an ocean, it's kind of like that's like the whitewash, but the depth of the ocean, the deep ocean, is that we have a lot of those similarities. And so I love helping people understand how to communicate better, um, and see that there's a lot more similarities and differences, and have that compassion for each other.
So you're one person, a wonderful person, but one person. So do you train others to do something similar? Do you license the Related Academy? How do you expand the reach from being one person?
So we have group programs, and then we have a hybrid model. So within the group programs, we have one-on-one coaches. I find that's the best because you get to be inspired by other people in the program, also setting themselves free from habits and doing badass things and inspiring each other. And then the more private things that you want to keep private, from your inner child work or personal things that happen in your relationships and things like that, that you can work on in the one-on-ones. And so, we have like groups of 12 people. So once 12 people, that group is formed, then we do another group of 12 people. So we just like scale it in that way. So we keep it intimate, but also the right dynamic almost. And then we just replicate those groups. So I love building systems. I also love empowering people with the knowledge that I have. They also bring their own expertise and skill sets and relationship skills and all sorts of things to the table. But it's just about creating those systems and helping people that do come into the Relating Academy have their needs met, understanding what they really want and need from the academy, and making that happen.
I like the idea of a sort of an academy alumni all sort of connected around the world, sort of all having a similar understanding of relationships and thoughts. It's pretty powerful. So from a personal perspective, you obviously invest a lot of time in what you do, and more about the sort of who you are. So what are the personal habits or practices that you follow that help you be the best version of yourself?
So I love having coaches and therapists and mentors because I'm constantly learning. in my personal relationships with my family, with my partner, with all of these like dynamics, like that's the one thing that I love about the Relating Academy and teaching relationships is like school's never out. You're never done.
Yes.
There's always more to learn and different like things to explore about
Mhm.
yourself and other people. So I'm constantly surprised sometimes, even like I'm like, oh, I thought I knew this, but I didn't know this, and exploring it deeper, and maybe there's a different angle, and I'm constantly learning. So that habit of having that support with a coach and a therapist, and um, just being curious about my own expansion and evolution and growth throughout, I think helps me both professionally and personally. And I never want to say like I don't have all the answers to all of the relationships. I have some of them. I have some of the puzzle pieces, and other people have others. But it's so massive, and I have blind spots just like everyone else. I have things that I need to work on and learn, and it's just like that intense curiosity about myself, and then having the support structures that help me do that. And then meditation is a huge habit of mine. I don't do it every single day. I do know that when I do it a few times a week, it does help me regulate myself. It helps me observe when my emotions are going up and down, and not to be swept away by them. Helps me have more compassion for myself and people. And really, like, some people say like, oh, walking is my meditation, or gym is my meditation, or reading is my meditation. But the thing is, old school meditation is learning to sit still in silence.
Yeah.
And this Instagram motivation porn, if I can call it that, whatever, tells us that all these other things are meditation. But if you are able to sit with your thoughts in stillness and silence for extended periods of time, your relationship with yourself will improve. And so when I do feel like I'm falling off, or things are being a bit wonky in my personal relationships or business, or something, things aren't aligning, then I do go back to, okay, maybe I'm not meditating enough. So
Mhm.
let's do that. And then the third thing I really like to focus on is the health of my body. So moving my body, gymming, walking, hiking, and being in nature as much as possible, because there is no separation between mind and body. You cannot have mental
Yeah.
health and
Yeah.
physical health. It is all one. It's all one. It's mind body. There's lots of authors that write about this. And so to have gratitude, the only way to have gratitude for something is to look after it. So if you have gratitude for your body, you look after it. If you have
Mm.
gratitude for your relationships, you look after them. There's no gratitude. You can't say I'm grateful for my body, but then you don't do anything to look after it. And so that's one way people like to delude themselves. And so, yeah, prioritizing looking after my body and moving and hanging out with friends. That's another thing, is really, infusing myself with people
Mhm.
that light me up and give me ideas, and we can
Yeah.
talk about, things that inspire us, is another habit of mine that helps me.
Mm. Yeah, so I think it must be a bit of pressure. You're known as the relationship person to make sure all your relationships are perfect, but I guess it's not realistic in some ways. But the last question, and this is a silly one, but it might be hard to answer. So it's a long, long way away, but we're at your 80th birthday party tonight. What are people going to be saying in the speeches about you?
Whew, I felt that one, Andrew. I think they would just say that she she loved incredibly hard, and even when she felt the fear, and things were uncertain, she did things anyways. There's a big element, like a through line in my life of like courage and doing things against the grain in a way. And like for me, they don't always feel scary, but I can see for other people they seem unconventional and different. And so I do like to pave a path for people to see something differently. You know, they say that saying, when they zig, you zag. So I hope they say that I loved incredibly hard and I zagged and I created the most heartwarming and heart-opening experiences and memories for people.
Perfect. I can 100% imagine them saying that. It's a long way away, as we said. Thank you so much for your time. It's a real pleasure talking to you. It's interesting. I do a lot of these, and sometimes you talk to people, you think, yeah, that was fine. It's but sometimes I sort of go back and think, I really want to listen to that one straight away. And because obviously we're talking and I'm listening, but I'm thinking about what I'm going to ask. But then I'm thinking, if I listen to it again, and I think there's a lot that you said about relationships. As I said, my relationship with my daughter's changing. She just turned 80. She's an adult now. She's leaving home, so that means my relationship with my wife will change as well, and with my son, he's the only one here. And it's having those thoughts about the different elements of relationships, and it's a really powerful message. So yeah, just thank you for what you're doing. It's you're making a difference. I think that's about the best thing you could say to somebody. So no, thank you.
Thank you for this beautiful platform that you've created, and all the hard work that goes into it, all the hard work that nobody sees in the background. I honor that, and I thank you for that.